Welcome to the Alouettes Flightdeck, the podcast dedicated to Montreal Alouettes football. I'm Cliffy D. You can find me on Twitter at Cliffy D.
And I'm Tim Capper. You can also find me on Twitter, but at Repact. That's REPPACT. And this episode of the podcast is presented by our good friends over at SportBuff, where if you use the discount code of FlightDeck-10 at checkout, you will save 10% off your entire order. So head over to sportbuffshop.com, use the code, save some cash, and enjoy your new sports merch.
And of course, the Alouettes Flightdeck is all over the internet. Make sure you check out our website at www.alouettesflightdeck.ca, where you will find the entire archive of our 7-year run so far. You can follow us on Twitter at AlouettesFLDeck. Check out our Instagram at AlouettesFlightdeck. Facebook, you can find us at facebook.com/AlouettesFlightdeckPod. Make sure you check out our merchandise store at teespring.com/stores/AlsFlightDeck. And don't forget, we are definitely on YouTube. Head over to youtube.com/AlouettesFlightDeck. Make sure you subscribe, leave us a like, leave us a comment, and let us know what you think of the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast.
Playoffs!
Oh, yeah. Playoffs. And the party is still going strong.
That's right. That's right. And we got to at least, because it is so related, that if you haven't already, Cliff and I put out a special bonus episode of the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast, where we spoke with former Alouettes president and CEO Mark Waitman about the infamous U2 game and how he really was involved in getting that thing up and running. As you guys know, it's been 25 years almost to the day that it occurred. Go listen to it. It is a great historical lesson. And if you didn't know, if you didn't know this about Montreal football history, that's one special episode you do need to listen to, because that game made sure that we have football today.
Absolutely. Just a great stroll down memory lane with Mark Waitman to hear his perspective on how that game took place, which, again, folks, if you didn't know, I mean, this game, it happened pretty much on a wing and a prayer. And my God, the fact that it came together the way it did, and it really did set the tone, essentially, for Montreal Alouettes football to not only stay in Montreal, stay in the Canadian Football League, but to thrive and allow the province of Quebec really to become the powerhouse that it is when it comes to football. So make sure you tune into that. And, we're looking forward to be able to provide little notes of history like that along the way as this podcast grows and continues, because, there's a lot of history in this team. I mean, like 25 years plus and counting. I mean, and there's still so much ground to cover. So we're looking forward to be able to do that with you guys over the years. And definitely check this out. It's definitely well worth a listen.
Exactly. It's funny. The game itself, in my opinion, it was so identical. A lot of similarities to the game in '97. The weather-wise, how the game started, but it was just nice to see the 20,000 plus that we had in stadium over at Percival Molson Stadium just go absolutely wild. It got loud. It got noisy. It got rowdy, and we were there to help the Owls beat the Tiger Cats, 28-17, advance to the East Final, which we have not done in such a long time.
Not since 2014. I mean, yeah, this was about as complete a game as you're going to find for the Montreal Alouettes. I got to tell you, like, we've been pretty critical this year of the Alouettes by and large. I mean, like, we've given them their props when they've earned them, as we should. But also, too, if something doesn't seem right, or it doesn't fit, or it's not working, we're going to mention it too. We try to be as objective as possible when it comes to this team. We want to be fair, but at the same time, we're going to say our piece. And we've been pretty critical at times about the slow starts, the just absolutely horrendous first halves of football. We didn't get that this past Sunday. That first half of the Eastern semifinal was probably some of, if not the best football we have seen from this team all season long. I mean, you talk about complete and utter domination for that first half. Absolutely sensational. Mm-hmm. As you said, the crowd was into it right away. I mean, when the Alouettes were on defense, I mean, they got loud. I mean, you got we reached the Thunderdome level almost immediately, and that's amazing. Usually it takes I find it usually takes at least a good quarter or two for the crowd to really truly get into it. But I think what helped is that Montreal scored on their opening drive, and it just kept on going from there. And it was a thing of beauty. There's just no other way to describe just how amazing it was from start to finish. I mean, once the second half got going, I mean, that kind of lulled a little bit. But I mean, Montreal really put on a clinic when you think about it. Like when you look at the overall body of work, Montreal truly put together an absolutely outstanding game, and they earned this berth into the Eastern Final against the Argonauts.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and obviously with some people remembering about history, it started with all the feels, like Sunday football used to be in Montreal. We got U2 right before kickoff. The players were hyped, man. And you, by the way, and if anybody has been to a game recently, you've noticed how basically it's, the Alouettes are caged up, so to speak. And you have some special guests come and unlock the cage. The players are going bonkers, man. I mean, yes, it's a cage in effect. But I mean, we know what the cage is made up out of. But man, they were rocking that cage and wanted to come out so hard and just to play that game on last Sunday.
I was fully expecting a Darius Pickett, who's always the first one out the gate, so to speak. I fully like you see him at times, like he's just right in front and he's vibing, like he's ready to go. I honestly thought he was just going to say the hell with it and just kick the door wide open and say, "Let's go," and come flying out. He didn't, but you could tell, like you said, these guys were jacked. They were ready to go. They were there on a mission, and my gosh, it was incredible. There's just literally no other way to describe this game as far as just complete dominance by the Alouettes, like just setting the tone early and by and large keeping it that way. It was sensational. There's just no other way to put it. It was sensational football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I said, the weather held off. I thought it was pretty funny. Whenever I think it was right before kickoff and during the game, all of a sudden a huge roar went right across the stadium because the sun came out. Would that have happened? I don't think that would have happened on a regular season game. I really don't think so. It was just so different. Just the atmosphere itself was just so different for this game versus a regular season game. But I guess it's just because of the stakes itself and how long it's been, since the Alouettes have had, had this good of a team to go on to the next level and potentially get to their first Grey Cup in 12 years. So, but obviously we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that was the possibility. But I'm sure what fans were looking at. But still, the Owls had not beaten the Tiger Cats in the playoffs in eons. I think somebody posted. I think it was like almost 10,000. Was it almost 10,000 days? Am I remembering the tweet properly?
It could very well be, yeah, or very close to 10,000 days.
I mean, just last time we beat Hamilton at any point in the playoffs was 96. So it's been a long road. It's been a long road, dude. And it's true. Hamilton's had that. Hamilton has for some reason has had our number in the playoffs.
Yeah, whether it was at Olympic Stadium, at Percival Molson Stadium, or in Hamilton, whether it was at Ivor Wynne or Tim Hortons Field. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whatever the stakes, whether it was Eastern semifinal or Eastern final, the Tiger Cats have pretty much owned the Alouettes when it comes to playoff football. But this year has really been something different for this team. I mean, it's just, man, I'm trying to put it into words, and it's just it's wild. I mean, it was just one of those things that you've come to expect certain things, especially too when you're a second place team and you're hosting. There is that pressure that you don't want to lose the game in your house, and especially with Montreal looking at the fact that the last 7 times these two teams met in a playoff game, Montreal's walked away the loser. So the pressure was immense for sure, but really something about this team, like they just rose to the occasion. It felt like, no, we will not be denied. We've got this. We have got this. And let's not forget, Hamilton was the Eastern representative of the Grey Cup the past 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of pressure on them as well. And they came on strong to end the season, just to squeak into the playoffs. So I mean, they had a lot to prove as well. They were hyped for this game as well. But I mean, like I said, something had to give. Something had to give with these two teams. You knew that someone was going to finally get off the schneid and make something happen. And lo and behold, Montreal proved that they wanted it from the get-go. And again, you saw it throughout the entire game. Like they played like a playoff team. They looked like that well-oiled machine that we'd been promised pretty much all season long. Like you talk about like when this team was considered the quote unquote hottest team of the CFL. They looked like a team that was playing like what you would consider to be the hottest team of the CFL. I mean, truly, whether it was offense, defense, special teams, everything was clicking this past Sunday. It really made for an incredible game, an incredible atmosphere at the stadium as well. Like this crowd was hungry for a win. This crowd was willing this team to victory. And credit to this team, credit to the coaches, credit to everybody. Like, they did the thing. They did what they needed to do, and yeah, to be able to. This was the last football game being played in Montreal in 2022. They went out with a bang. They sent everybody home happy. You really, truly can't ask for more than that.
No. And props, obviously, to the 20,693 fans that were in attendance. The first half itself, Cliff, it wasn't perfect, but it was very close to being perfect. I mean, the Owls did lead 22-6 at the end of 30 minutes. But it's, again, they did what they needed to do in the first half to get ahead. Second half is some of the things that we have a couple of questions about, which needs to be fixed going into this week versus Toronto. But what else can you say about that first half?
Well, I mean, take your pick. What you want to talk about? Offense, defense, special teams. I mean, everything. As I said, everything was clicking. I mean, Chandler Worthy had some really nice returns. Really put the Alouettes in. Gave him short fields to work with. I mean, he proved that he definitely deserves to be the Eastern nominee for most outstanding special teams player. Like I think a lot of people were kind of maybe even questioning that just a little bit, but those questions were answered with a couple of his returns, and damn near had a house call for the first time in a long time. I mean, he unfortunately stepped out of bounds, I think, at the 20-yard line, so it didn't quite count, but man, it damn near happened again. And like, this guy is just so exciting and so much fun to watch on special teams.
Oh, no kidding. And I think the cool thing, too, is that obviously, it's playoff football in the CFL when they bring out the Sky Cam. And it's so weird, the stadium as old as Percival Molson is to have the Sky Cam there. And Chandler started off the game right. They won the toss. Chandler got kicked the ball, and right away, He put the Sky Cam to use for sure, because one heck of a return that set the Alouettes up early for that first touchdown, to get into scoring position for that first touchdown.
Yeah, on offense, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be laughing about this, but Trevor Harris, the Trevor Harris we were promised when the Alouettes traded for him last season, he's here. He finally showed up. He looked outstanding. He wasn't perfect. He did throw an interception, and I mean, it was an ill-advised throw, but that was his one little blip on an otherwise I won't say perfect day, but damn near close to perfect. I mean, he looked like the Trevor Harris of the 2019 Eastern semifinal when he was playing for the Edmonton Elks, and man, he did it. And you know what blew my mind? Like, just watching the game again. He didn't hold on to the ball very long. He got the ball out quickly. And you know what happened? He moved the chains. He found receivers. And when he couldn't find receivers, he switched things up. He handed off to William Stanback. He was rumbling for some yardage. Walter Fletcher, oh my God. That he had the game of his life, I think. I think that was probably, I think he's going to look back and say that was probably the best game I've ever played as a professional football player. My God. That the touchdown that he scored was sensational. Like, that was the run of his life. That outstanding. Just, my God, like that. And that was great. I mean, everybody was expecting Stanback to go off and do his thing. And yeah, he had a solid game. No question about that. But Walter Fletcher was, I won't say forgotten. He wasn't, definitely not forgotten. I'm pretty sure Hamilton was scouting for him, but even then might have underestimated him just a little bit, and he made them pay. I mean, 77 yards on the ground. Beautiful touchdown. I mean, he was doing it all out there. I mean, man, just an absolutely phenomenal effort from our man Fletch. He did the damn thing for sure. Yeah,
and having this two and potentially three-headed running back monster is paying off already. Obviously, Stanback is finally getting back what seems to be into his groove. You could tell. We understood when he came back late in the year that it's not going to be the Stanback that we remember the past couple of years right away. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, maybe some things are psychological. You don't want to make sure you don't want to get hurt again. You may be playing differently. Your body has to get used to the pounding again. But Walter Fletcher has been great. Joshua Antwi has been great, even though he didn't get a rush this week. But still, it makes teams think, are they going to go to one of these three guys or are they going to go to the air? And I'm trying to remember the last time that a team had potentially three really big threats at running back on the field at the same time. So it bodes well, obviously, for the Owls heading into the Eastern Final versus Toronto.
No, that's it. And again, if it's one of those, I think Stanback has been slowly building himself back up, getting his confidence back, getting that rust off, and you can tell he's feeling it. Like he's ready to go off. And we all thought it was going to happen this past Sunday, and he played a very respectable game. He was a very valuable contributor. I got a feeling, though, just based off of that, just the fact that it's been slowly mounting game time after game time after game time. He's just getting better and better and better. I mean, if we thought he was going to go off in the Eastern semifinal, didn't quite do that, but maybe he's truly saving himself for the Eastern final. And that could be when we see that William Stanback of old, the one that would rush for 200 plus yards and just bowl people over and just be so difficult to handle. And if he's not, well, guess what? Walter Fletcher's right there, and he's going to go off. And what a dual threat he has been all season long. But to see what he's been able to do on the ground, you saw it against Hamilton, and I guarantee you now, Toronto's defensive staff, they're looking like, okay, I'm sure they were already thinking about Stanback, but now you have no choice but you got to respect what Fletcher does on the field, and now you're basically you're scouting those two guys for sure. And Joshua Antwi, he's no slouch either. So yeah, I mean, if you don't give him any thought, I guarantee Montreal will find a way to get him involved in the game and make him pay. I'm telling you, Toronto. I hope they use this bye week correctly and truly was paying attention to the game, truly taking advantage of what Montreal was able to do, because that's what you're up against next. And if you're not ready, Montreal will definitely make you pay.
Yeah. Trevor Harris was 27 to 34 for 243 yards. I mean, not the same numbers that he had versus, when he was playing with Edmonton back in 2019, but still, one interception, one TD. As we mentioned, Cliff mentioned before, that interception, it looked to be thrown behind Winicky, and he tipped it, and it was intercepted. But I mean, it's no here or there now. But Fletcher, 77 yards on 7 carries for an average of 11. Wow, touchdown. Dominic Davis had one too. What's funny is that it wouldn't have been Fletcher that had 2 TDs? Should have had 2 TDs?
Should have had 2. And again, looking at the replay again.
Yeah, I watched the replay again, dude. I was like, really?
Yeah, that didn't sit right with me. As far as I'm concerned, he broke the plane. For him to be down to 1, that's no, I'm sorry. I don't buy that.
Yeah, I
mean, you want to call us biased when it comes to that, fine. But I'm just telling you what I saw with my own eyes. Like, listen, I don't see how you not call that a touchdown, but okay, well, fine.
Let's put it this way: the one in the one that was replayed in the BC game, that was down at the 1. This one's a lot. It should have been a touchdown. But either way, either way. Dominic Davis did score the rushing touchdown. Stanback 66 yards and 10 carries, and then the wide receivers. What can we say? First there was that little bit of a switch. And I wanted to ask your opinion on this one, Cliff. A little bit of switch on the slot backs. First when Reggie White went out and they brought in Tyson Philpott full time, but basically by himself rather, and gave him the start. They put him on the other side. They put him on the right side slot back. But now for the past 2 games, they put him on the left and put Jake on the right. What's your thought? Because we remember, Tyson did quite well that first game being on that other side. What's your thought on how the Owls have worked where Jake and Philpott are going to be basically stationed?
I kind of wonder if it's just because Trevor tends to favor the right side a little bit more. So I think in a matter of trying to get maybe just to help build up Jake's confidence, because let's not forget, Jake Winicky had been pretty quiet for the better part of the year. Like, it's only recently that we're finally getting to see.
3 quarters, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're now TD Jake is back. Like, we're starting to see TD Jake again, which is great, and couldn't have come at a better time. And I can't help but wonder if maybe this is a matter of, okay, when Trevor makes his reads, he tends to look more to the right than anywhere else. Maybe he feels a little more confident being able to throw to Jake and make something happen. I mean, let's face it, Tyson Philpott's still a rookie, so sometimes a veteran quarterback isn't going to always trust his rookie, even though there's no question that Philpott is a phenomenal playmaker, and he himself had a couple of really nice plays this past Sunday. So, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't trust him with a pass, but okay, I'm just playing the devil's advocate. I can't help but wonder if that's the reason why they decided to switch things up, or it's just a simple matter of just keep the opposing defenses guessing, kind of.
Yep.
If they're expecting Philpott to be in one way and Winicky the other, and then you kind of switch it up, it's like, oh, okay, now you gotta change your defensive scheme just enough to be able to cover those two guys. So could be the reason why. So
we'll see this week once the depth charts come out. We'll see if it's the same or if Coach Machocha makes some minor tweaks. But I wouldn't expect it. Leading receiver for the Alouettes this week was Eugene Lewis. 7 receptions, 98 yards, no touchdowns. He's so close to getting 100 yards in the getting over the 100-yard mark in receiving. Next was TD Jake, 60 yards on 5 receptions and that one touchdown the very first touchdown in the first quarter. Tyson Philpott, 4 receptions, 34 yards. Walter Fletcher, 4 receptions, 25 yards. William Stanback got into the receiving game, 4 receptions, 14 yards. And KJG, 3 receptions, 12 yards. And we had to at least mention Hergy Maela had 2 targets, but no catches.
No, a little surprising because, I mean, like, he seems to always be good for that one catch that's just out of nowhere, but I mean, when Gino's doing his thing and TD Jake is, starting to catch fire again, I mean, this team has so many great weapons at the receiver position that you just can't throw to everybody. But Lord knows Trevor's going to try. And more often than not, he's able to complete. So, I mean, to be able to spread the ball around like that, really get the offense as engaged as possible and just throwing up different looks more than anything else. And again, it really looks like now that Trevor's got the confidence that we've come to expect and we were promised, and for him to have that relationship with his receivers now, again, could not have come at a better time than this. Like, this is what we wanted. This is what we were promised, as I've said. And for it to finally come to fruition, it's great. It's really great to see. And yeah, like I said, we definitely got to give props. I mean, Trevor played a very, very good football game, all things considered. Still a couple decisions here and there that I probably wouldn't have done if I was him. But again, I mean, I'm not him, so it's easy for us to criticize sitting in the stands versus him maybe out there doing what he needs to do. But he did it. People know how we've been critical of him. We really have. But I like to think when he does well, we give him his flowers, we give him his props. And right now, like this past Sunday, aside from that errant throw that ended up being picked off, he played as close to a perfect game as one could hope for. I mean, it would have been nice to see him throw a couple more touchdowns, sure, but like, he got the Alouettes into the red zone, but created scoring opportunities, even if it was just getting him down to the goal line and letting Dominique Davis push it in, or Walter Fletcher just looking absolutely fantastic doing what he does. I mean, the scoring opportunities were there. He made the most of his opportunities and put points on the board. And that's all we've ever wanted from this quarterback is, don't promise us this. Don't try to dazzle us with these stats. As we've said before, stats are nice, but winning is nicer. And that's exactly what Trevor Harris did this past Sunday. He won this game. He helped create a victory for this team. That's all we've ever wanted from this guy. You want us to sing his praises? Well, guess what? That's how you're going to do it. That's how you get us to get on board with this guy. And here we are. I mean, he did it. That's all we wanted, and he did it. So,
yep, I agree.
Again, we got to take our hats off to him. Yep. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and we're talking about how we're talking about in the past couple of weeks. One of the big stats that you really need to look at and how well a team is doing is second down conversions. The Owls are 15 to 25 this week. That 60% clip is what you want to see from a team. On second down. They held Hamilton to just 44%, so only 8 of 18. So it's there. It was there. And, how perfect the first half went. Now, mind you, this wasn't how perfect it could have gone as a complete game. You also, with David Cote, getting some love from the upright in that second half.
finally a doink that actually works in your favor.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all kind of winced as soon as we heard the thud of the ball hitting, but then as soon as we saw it tumble down and it being good, like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, and because he had missed one earlier, which I thought he was going to make. He missed a 54-yarder, I think it was. Just off the top of my head, but yeah, but it seemed like everything was going well. I mean, even for the defense too. But we have to at least mention about Hamilton. I mean, Dane Evans he's made such a name for himself. They let go Jeremiah Mazzoli. Dane became the starter. But then there's some issues, getting hurt, and Matthew Shields coming in and playing very well. It just, that first half really just seemed to be the first half for Dane Evans and Tim White. I mean, I think the Owls knew Tim White was going to get the ball, but who knew at that point, Cliff, with the amount of catches, it was basically him and Tim White in that first half. And I guess it kind of showed because, the Hamilton only had 6 points on the board at halftime.
I was going to say, yeah, they definitely had the connection that we've come to expect from them all season long. But kind of like that criticism that we've had of Trevor Harris, like it's all well and good to, make nice passes and get downfield and get to the red zone. But if you're only walking away with field goals, you're not going to win football games consistently. And that's really what it came down to, was Montreal was scoring touchdowns with their drives in the first half, whereas Hamilton, best they could offer up was field goals. Mm-hmm. I mean, Dane Evans definitely he's really had a hot and cold kind of year. He's been up and down. He's been dealing with injury issues. I can't help but wonder, too, if maybe the pressure of being the man now in Hamilton, because as you said, they had pretty much had to choose between him and Jeremiah Masoli. They went with Dane. Masoli left for Ottawa. So now everything fell on Dane Evans. And I don't know if necessarily the pressure got to him or if it was just a series of unfortunate events, but things didn't quite work out the way they would have hoped. Yes, they still made the playoffs. Yes, they still managed to show up for this game. And I mean, I still think Dane Evans is a very solid quarterback. I just can't help but wonder if this is just part of the growing process for him to learn and get better, even though he has played in Grey Cup games at this point. I mean, one can't help but wonder, though. I mean, like Matthew Shields coming in, though, and he played a pretty solid game, all things considered, as well. And I tell you, my heart goes out to Matty. I mean, he's a friend of the show for sure. We I can't help but wonder, like, if there could have been some way to keep him here in Montreal, but he too probably felt like it wasn't going to he couldn't stay here and just sit on the sidelines. Like, he had to be a part of the action. And Hamilton, to their credit, definitely gave him every opportunity to make something happen. And by and large, he did. He got great playing time this year. He got the opportunity to show what he can do. Were the results there? I think for the most part, yes, but there was, it wasn't perfect by any stretch for him as well. To me, I can't help but feel like, man, like if anyone was going to beat the Alouettes, I would have loved for it to have been Matthew Shields. Mm-hmm. But I just don't think the Alouettes were not going to be denied this past Sunday. And it's unfortunate because, now, once again, Matthew's kind of on the outside looking in. I don't know if he's going to get the same love that he would have gotten here in Montreal. But, I sincerely hope Tiger Cat fans realize what they have in this guy. He is a talent for sure. He is definitely someone that belongs in the conversation. He definitely is a quarterback that, given the opportunity, can win games. And he has done that for the Tiger Cats. He's helped them win football games. I'll go so far as to say, if it wasn't for him being as solid as what he was, maybe Hamilton doesn't make it to the Eastern semifinal. I mean, this is a guy that all he's wanted was the opportunity to show what he can do. And when he's gotten those opportunities, I'd say he's made the most of them. So I sincerely hope that Matty realizes that. And as he goes forward with his career, hopefully he gets that chance again to prove what he can do and say that, hey, I definitely belong in this league. I definitely think I can play in this league, and I can definitely be a superstar if truly given the chance.
Yeah. Final look at the game. We have to at least talk about the defense itself because, man, they stepped up in the second half. Obviously, we had some issues, which I want to touch just briefly on for the offense. But we need to give props to this defense, man. I mean, I think it was 6 total sacks. A monster hit by Beverett. Holy crap. Like shot out of the cannon. It's one of those plays where if you're a fan looking at it, it's like, where the hell was, where was the lineman supposed to be blocking him? And also,
Yeah.
It being challenged, his hit being challenged for roughing. Come on, man, was not even close.
No, that was nonsense. And I mean, it's not Beverett's fault that he had Schultze dead to rights. Unfortunately, like there was literally nothing stopping them. There was nothing but air between those two guys, and Tyrese just put the wood to him, and I mean, it was incredible. Just an incredible football play. I mean, it looked probably a lot worse than what it actually was, but yeah, obviously, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I do find it's kind of funny though that it was like 1 year ago, Tyrese Beverett was with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Matthew Schultz was with the Montreal Alouettes, and here they are on the opposite sides and being involved in a play like that. It's just incredible. And that play was just synonymous of how Montreal had played overall. Like they made the statement. They punched Hamilton in the face numerous times, which I said they had to do. I said they really had to set the tone. They really had to walk in there and just punch them in the face. And that's essentially what they did. And can we just take a minute to appreciate Mike Jones?
Yo, boy.
Mike Jones, man. 2 absolutely phenomenal interceptions. And he's been doing this all year. He has just been such an outstanding playmaker. It was kind of funny. I don't know if you remember, but the game that we went to in Ottawa, poor Mike, he was burnt like toast.
Badly. Oh, yeah. I remember, yeah, that first half was so bad for him.
And it's hard to believe that same Mike Jones this past Sunday just looked phenomenal. Like you could have almost made if you're going based on that one game, you could have made a case for him being most outstanding defensive player for the Alouettes because my God, he was all over the field, making life miserable for Hamilton's receivers. And yeah, those 2 INTs were just money, just absolute money.
Oh, it's like he baited. It's almost like he baited Schultze on that second interception his second interception in the second half. It was like almost Schultz perfect throw, but it's like there he was.
Just like you said, just right place at the right time. That's where Mike Jones was, and just gave Schultz just enough hope. Like, okay, I got this. I got my receiver, and then taken away.
Exactly. I think we touched on it briefly before we go because we actually do have somebody with us this week. We got Mike Mitchell to talk about the upcoming matchup between the Owls and the Argos in the Eastern Final. But thoughts on the second half offense? It was the defense took over. We only came away with 6 points. Trevor, I think, was 6 for 7 for 24 yards. I think that's what it was. It's still very frustrating. We still did well, but I mean, I understand with running but still, it needs to be a balance. I think we need to have a complete, 60 minutes. We need ass kicking and a complete 60 minutes from not only the defense but also the offense next week. But are you concerned about the second? Were you concerned about the second half?
A little bit. Like I kind of felt like they were kind of resting on their laurels just a little bit, like just kind of letting Hamilton hang around, and that's always a mistake. Once again, credit to the defense because they're the ones that truly stepped up and made sure that Hamilton was starting to make it just a little bit interesting, but then they would just slam the door on them, and that's what you want your defense to do. But at the same time, that was. That if I was going to make a critique about this offense, would be they kind of took the second half off, just kind of content to coast and just say, okay, we got this. We put enough points on the board, and really, truly, there's no such thing as too many points to put on the board when it comes to especially a playoff game. Like you don't want to leave any doubt whatsoever. And I can understand. You almost make the argument like, well, you don't want to burn yourself out and score too many points and put yourself at risk for injury or anything like that, but at the same time, too, you don't want to let a team like Hamilton hang around because they've won games like that. And Montreal is not they're not that good of a team that they can afford to take like whole quarters off. And I really think that that third quarter, the offense kind of just did the bare minimum. And as I said, let Hamilton, kind of get that false sense of hope that, okay, touchdown here, touchdown there. We're back in this game. But once again, this comes back to the defense just being as outstanding as what they have been. I mean, they made Hamilton work for everything that they had, like whether it was a touchdown or field goal, they had to bust their ass to be able to get even that much. And then just when they got that little bit of hope, Montreal's defense decided, okay, not today. We will not be denied. And they did what they had to do. They made the plays happen. They took the ball away, caused turnovers, and they just made, whether it was Dane Evans or Matthew Schultz, just made their day a miserable one.
Yeah.
And again, the ends justify the means in the sense that they got the win. They are moving on to the Eastern Final. But yeah, I sincerely hope this coming Sunday that especially against Toronto, who I know has the benefit of being able to see what Montreal's been able to do, you can't take any quarters off. You can't take any plays off, really, truly. I mean, you're talking about having the opportunity to go and play for the Grey Cup. You got to leave it all out there. There's no question about that. So sure. you cannot have a third quarter like you had this past Sunday. You got to go balls to the wall, 100%. The first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. You got to be able to do all of that if you hope to make it to the Grey Cup game in Regina.
Exactly. And also it reared its ugly head again too this week. Short yardage offense. Yeesh. And they just gotten the ball back too because of a contacting the kicker penalty. Mm-hmm. It's like three. Is it like the last 2 out of 5 weeks? Last 3 out of 5 weeks where we've had it. Yeah, I think 3 out of the last 5 weeks we've had an issue. I'm like, that's got to stop. That really has, because that could, coming again, Eastern Final. You can't let that happen. You cannot let that happen. And maybe they just should have punted it or tried a field goal, something. But again, it's something else they need to work on. Obviously, going into Sunday.
100%. So again, overall, absolutely outstanding game. I mean, everything was clicking the way it should be. I mean, again, Alouettes fans have to be excited. They have to be excited about what they saw, and can't help but be just a little bit hopeful that, hey, you know what? Based on how Toronto and Montreal played each other throughout the regular season, I mean, you talk about 2 very tightly contested affairs. Mm-hmm. And 1 glorified preseason game, which, at least showed what kind of depth this team has, both teams have. It's going to make for a very fun game this coming Sunday.
Exactly.
Without question. And I'm really excited to have Mike Mitchell on to talk about it, because, I mean, he definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes to the Argos. And I think he'll shine a little bit of light and just, kind of expand on just how much fun this game has the potential to be for us.
Exactly. And speaking of, let's go ahead and get Mike in right away. And when we get done talking with him, Cliffy and I will give our look at the upcoming game this Sunday versus the Toronto Argonauts.
The Alouettes and the Argonauts are playing in the Eastern Final. It is going to be a massive game this coming Sunday. And to join us to help preview this massive Eastern Final is a man we've had on this podcast before. He represents CFL News Hub. He represents XFL News Hub. Friend of the show, Mr. Mike Mitchell. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on.
It's great to be back on with you guys. Love the show, and it's exciting times coming up this weekend.
Well, I tell you, man. I mean, this is what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting to see who's going to make it to the Grey Cup. And now that we know that Hamilton will not be representing the Eastern Division again, it's almost like a brand new, like an open field. Like, anything's possible now. It could be the Alouettes, it could be the Argonauts. Like, this is going to be something new for fans that haven't seen in the past 2 years. I mean, it's pretty exciting.
Oh, absolutely. It's to see BC, Montreal in the mix here, along with obviously Toronto, and then, the champions, so the defending champions, Winnipeg. Everyone wants to take them down. It's nice to see some fresh blood in the mix. And these are very good teams, especially the second half of the season. We know BC they got sidetracked, obviously, the Nathan Rourke injury, but they did a good job, steadying the course and keeping themselves in contention until he came back. And that was a huge win for that franchise. It's been a long time since they've been in the playoffs. And quietly, both Toronto and Montreal were 2 of the hottest teams in the CFL in the second half of the season. Everybody knows how Montreal went through an upheaval and changes at the beginning of the year, and where how far they had to come to get to this point. And Toronto was 4-5 at one point, and they won 7 of their last 8, ended up winning 11 games. So I know a lot of people are critical of the Eastern teams. You look at a team like Montreal. They stood toe-to-toe with a lot of big teams. Beating Hamilton's not easy. I know a lot of people look at Hamilton's 8-10 overall record and we're kind of critical of them, and rightfully so. But in the second half of the season, Hamilton was a hot team too. They won 5 of their last 6. They beat Calgary. They beat Winnipeg. And a year ago, Hamilton knocked off Montreal in the playoffs. So a little bit of revenge on the Alouettes' part, being able to beat the Ticats there. So I think we've got 4 very good teams at the end of the road here. It's going to be fascinating to see who steps up in the clutch and gets to the Grey Cup.
You look at the season series, though. I mean, less one game really at the end of the year, but the season series between these two teams were just was an absolute joy to watch.
Oh, it was tremendous, and look how closely contested. I mean, when the standings were over at the end of the season, Toronto ended up winning the division by 2 games. But look at the 2 games they won over Montreal, both by the slimmest of possible margins. I mean, you throw out obviously the glorified preseason game at the end of the year, which was entertaining for what it was. But the 2 games head-to-head Toronto had with Montreal, the Argos home opener, they won by 1 point because of David Cote field goal off the crossbar. If he just misses it a couple inches to the left or right or whatever, it's a single, and we're going to overtime. But that was crazy. And then obviously the last game at Molson, where Toronto won 24-23 on the game-ending Rouge. That's about as close as you can get. So those 2 games decided by 2 points, determined who won the East. But in reality, whoever wins Sunday's game can truly lay claim to the Eastern throne, because even though the standings will say the Argos won the East, if the Alouettes win, they're the East representative in the Grey Cup. So it would be crazy if this game ends up being decided by 1 point. Maybe in Montreal's favor. Maybe a game-ending kick will go in their favor in this one.
You never know. I mean, hey, and if I'm not mistaken, weren't both games ended on a Rouge?
What was that?
Both games ended on a Rouge. The first game in Toronto, a missed field goal for a Rouge, and then the one in Montreal. Right. So they both ended on a Rouge.
Yeah, 20-19. Yeah, Toronto won that game 20-19. That is correct. And then of course 24-23 at Molson. So yes, both games decided by 1 point. I mean, that's as close as you can get. You can't get any closer than that. So I mean, that shows you how competitive these games were. And what's crazy about that first game with the Argos and the Alouettes, which was Toronto's home opener, was at the time Montreal had a totally different configuration in terms of head coach and quarterback. You had Vernon Adams starting, who was pulled pretty quickly, and Khari Jones was the head coach. So it was it's hard to dissect these 2 teams head to head. The last meeting is the one you really can kind of look at and say, well, how did these 2 teams match up against one another? And, depending on which side of the fence you're on, you can look at Montreal's 1 point loss to Toronto on October 22nd as, maybe they squandered scoring opportunities early. If you're on the other side of things, you can give credit to Toronto's defense, which was number 1 in the CFL and giving up the least amount of majors in the red zone. So it depends on how you look at that. But Montreal's offense got real hot. They cracked the code of Toronto's defense late in that game. Trevor Harris got hot, and they came down the field and tied that game. And then, Toronto mounted a very good late drive with less than a minute left to get into field goal range before the game-winning Rouge. So I think these teams match up. It's a very interesting matchup between both the Argos and the Alouettes, and it's going to be fascinating to see how things end up.
Oh, for sure. And also another thing, too, is that, whether it was a meaningless game or not, the last game of the preseason, you need to remember, too, Mike, is that was the first ever win for the Alouettes at BMO Field since the Argos moved to BMO Field. So they now know they can win at BMO Field.
It helps psychologically. I think Montreal has I don't know if this is a proper terminology. They have the edge in terms of pressure in this game. Not to say that there isn't pressure on the Alouettes to win, but there's a lot when you're the home team in the final, and like the Argonauts are in this situation. And a year ago, the Argos lost on their own home field at BMO, and fell short of getting to the Grey Cup. There's pressure on you. Everything the Argos did in the offseason was to try to get back to this point, to have an East Final game at home. They accomplished that, but I hate to put it this way, for better, for worse, fair, unfair, if the Argos come up short on Sunday, the success of this season, hate to use this term, but for the boatmen, it's washed away, because everything they've done this was to get over the hump, to get to the Grey Cup, to not suffer the same fate they did a year ago. And so I think there's more pressure on Toronto to win this game, especially when you're at home. They're the favorite, very slight favorite. 3.5, 4, depending on what sportsbook you look at. And that's commonplace when you're the home team to be a slight favorite. But I think the pressure is squarely on their shoulders. The Argos are in a situation where if they lose again at home in the East Final, they might have to make some decisions. I mean, I would assume Ryan Dinwiddie is back, but I'm not so sure if McLeod Bethel-Thompson falls short in terms of his performance, I'm not so sure they don't look in a different direction at that. So there's a lot at stake. There's always a lot at stake. Going to a Grey Cup, there's a lot at stake. But I think there's a lot at stake on Toronto's end. They might look a lot different if the result is not what they want when the smoke clears on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. To me, I think the biggest weapon for Toronto right now, unquestionably, is AJ Ouellette. I mean, my God, this guy's it's like trying to tackle a bowling ball. You just cannot stop him. How's it been for Toronto?
It's funny about him. Obviously, a lot of people know his story. In college, he was an excellent player, team captain in Ohio, teammates with Nathan Rourke. He was a standout player, and he's been a good backup player, role player, on and off the roster and practice roster. And he finally got an opportunity to shine. And what I really like about him is, because for a long time, Toronto only had one back all season because of Andrew Harris's injury, was how versatile he is. He's really a complete running back. He's a tremendous receiver. He's a good runner, running people over, even leaping over people. But the area of his game that I really like, and I guess it goes with his nature because he's such a tough, hard-nosed player, is he's such a fantastic pass blocker. So the Argos have had issues with their offensive line all season long, and he's done such a great job as the last line of defense, especially with the Argos down to their fourth and fifth offensive tackle. Toronto hasn't had a lot of efficiency this year throwing the ball down the field. And one of the reasons, a big reason for that, is quarterback's inability to, set his feet in the pocket and throw downfield because of the pass rush. And so AJ's really helped out the Argos offense, which kind of leads us to this Sunday. It makes you wonder, do you really want to cheapen his role, lessen his role? A lot of Argos fans, they're happy Andrew Harris is coming back, but they don't want it to come at the expense of AJ Ouellette's playing time.
So now do you do have two running backs in the backfield? Do you have do you put him out as fullback, or do you line him up at receiver? The fact that he's so versatile is definitely
at a team across the field. It's a very good point. You're looking at a team across the field in Montreal that's really done a nice job of working in. I'm glad they've done it because Walter Fletcher's been terrific of working Fletcher and Stanback in together at the same time. You figure someone as accomplished as Stanback is arguably, if not the top running back in the CFL, one or two, whoever you want to pick. And so Fletcher's been so good for them that Montreal's figured out a way to factor in both backs. Can the Argos pull that off? See, that's the thing with the Argos. Typically with a division-winning team, you figure that they're set in their ways, but there's a little bit of unpredictability in how Toronto's going to utilize their lineup because they might have some changes to their backfield and how they utilize their running backs and their offensive line because they have some players, Isaiah Cage being one of them, who played in that season finale game, could very well line up at left tackle. And he's had concussion issues all season long, and they've missed him. He's arguably their best pass blocker. So it'd be interesting to see if they move him. And then Blake, who's playing out of position, has been playing at left tackle, might have to go back into the interior. So, and then there's a couple of question marks in terms of Peter DeCastro and other players who's going to be at center for them. So the Argos might have a different looking lineup in the East Final. That could be a good thing and a bad thing.
And we can't overlook Brandon Banks. He is a notorious Alouettes killer. He did it for so many years as a member of the Tiger Cats, and no doubt he's going to be looking to do the same thing again as a member of the Double Blue. Yeah,
Banks. It's interesting with Banks because he's become a complimentary player at best. He hasn't been the star player that he was even a few years back, and so. For whatever reason, McLeod Bethel-Thompson's had good connections with Curly Gittens, phenomenal receiver, and DeVaris Daniels and others. But when it comes to Banks, he hasn't been that big play guy that he's been. Speedy B just hasn't produced at that level. He's had his moments during the season. I don't know if Alouettes fans or Argos fans are going to see that same type of player. He's still productive at times, but he's not a primary option in the Toronto offense. And the Argos have tried to put him on returns. That hasn't really panned out either. So, perhaps he can, in the big game, step up and recapture some of his previous glory. But, it remains to be seen if he's ever going to be that type of player again. Although, like you mentioned, Alouettes fans have plenty of nightmares of him burning them in the past. So you never know. He might have one last surge left there, but we'll see.
And I believe he's also had, I think, a touchdown in both of the two games that he played against Montreal.
Yes, he has, and it wasn't, I think he may have finished like 4th or 5th on the Argos during the season in terms of receptions and yards. But, he does seem to save his best for when he plays Montreal, that's for sure.
So that's definitely going to be something that I sincerely hope that Noah Thorpe is paying very close attention to, even though, as you said, he's maybe not be the focal point of the offense, but I mean, he's just one of those guys that you just leave him open and he will make you pay.
Yeah, no, and Montreal's pass rush, Montreal's coming off a tremendous defensive performance. It's like the one area where they've had some struggles here and there because of injuries and everything else. But against Hamilton, I believe they got 6 sacks. They got off to a big start against Ham, forced them to abandon the run. And, the Beverett and others, Tyrese Beverett and others stepped up big time. So I think, that's going to be a big factor in this game is the pass rush of Montreal, being able to get to McLeod Bethel-Thompson, not letting him get into a comfort zone. And so, before the season started, when I looked at Montreal's roster, I studied them, I predicted that they would be in the Grey Cup against Winnipeg. I never thought it would be in this kind of configuration, obviously with a different head coach, Trevor Harris, on the pivot there. So it's a little bit different of a configuration in terms of the way Montreal is set up to get to a Grey Cup. But here we are. It's possible that they could very well face Winnipeg or BC in the Grey Cup.
You talk about quarterbacks, McLeod Bethel-Thompson, you got Trevor Harris. It's, Macbeth has basically been. It's kind of like both these quarterbacks kind of went through the exact same thing this year, and the whole switch over to Trevor Harris in Montreal after VA gets hurt and then summarily traded. But obviously Macbeth and Harris and their wide receiving core can make a huge difference in this game, along with the I said, like you were saying before, the running backs.
Yeah, when you look at Montreal's offense, Trevor Harris, he's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the CFL. Sometimes people will label him as boring, but his efficiency is so good. He plays mistake-free football, and if he's playing on that level, and then that's going to be helpful towards the Alouettes' chances of winning the East Final. They have 2 elite players. They have several good players on their roster, but Montreal has 2 elite players in William Stanback. We haven't quite seen him. He's playing better. We haven't quite seen Stanback at full force yet. And then, of course, it goes without saying, Geno Lewis is arguably the best receiver in the entire league. There are a few other candidates for that, but he's definitely on that level. So I think, when you compare the 2 quarterbacks, I think Trevor Harris is the more efficient, safer play. And I think McLeod is fully capable. Obviously, he led the league in passing yardage. He's fully capable of having big games and making big throws, but he's a lot more streaky. And he'll run hot and cold in every game he plays. So the Argos fans are not sure what to expect from MBT, where Trevor Harris maybe sometimes is not as sexy, but plays a much more efficient and safer game. So I think that matchup is a curious one. I know Argos fans are obviously familiar with Harris's play. He's gotten better as he's gotten older. I know that sometimes he's overlooked, maybe underappreciated. I think he's vastly underrated, Trevor Harris. He doesn't get enough respect, in my opinion. But this is a big game for both quarterbacks in terms of proving that they can play at a championship level. It gets no bigger than the final, getting your team to a Grey Cup, leading the way. So the winner of this one will earn more respect from the CFL crowd.
And when we talk about defensive players for the Argos, one can't overlook Jagger Davis, knowing that he's been to, he was in the past 5 Grey Cup games and is looking to make this his 6th as a member of the Double Blue. That's
crazy. I mean, it's quite a stat. Every year he's been in a league, he's been in a Grey Cup. So, and he hasn't won them all, but just to get to that point is very impressive. Yeah, the Argos, Corey Mace is a first-time defensive coordinator. He came over from Calgary. He's done a tremendous job with that defensive unit. he obviously brought in some of his Calgary guys there. Garrett Davis has been very good. Enoch Mwamba's had a terrific year, very unheralded year. The reason why the team is so good in the red zone area of stopping teams from scoring, limiting them to field goals, and forcing 48 turnovers this year is because Mwamba's really at an advanced stage in his career where he's like a coach on the field. So he's gotten really good at getting all the players in the right position. And so the big factor for Toronto this week is whether or not they get back Wynton McManus. They didn't have him the last time they played Montreal. It's looking likely that he might miss Sunday's game. McManus was arguably Toronto's best defensive player and a true defensive player of the year candidate before he went down. I believe it was week 16 against Calgary. So anyhow, but defensively, Toronto has a very good secondary. They missed Chris Edwards the last time they played Montreal. Jamal Peters had a terrific season. They've been very good on the defensive side of the ball, kind of. But the one thing I will say for Montreal is I know the Argos were missing a couple of key players the last time they played Montreal, but Trevor Harris did a fantastic job against the Argos defense the last time they played. He threw for over 400 yards. And so the Alouettes had close to 500 yards in that game. So I think there's going to be some adjustments on both sides. And so it's going to be interesting to see how these teams match up. But there's a lot of talent on the defensive side for Toronto that some people are not too keen on.
Who do you think gets the unfortunate assignment of trying to cover Geno Lewis?
Ooh, I think you'll see a little bit of teamwork on that one. I think Peters. The Toronto's corners are tall, and I think Peters is their most physical cornerback. So he'll probably get help. He should get help. But I think Peters, who's done a good job this year, had an all-star capable season. They'll put him out there. The Argos had some issues with Geno. I mean, everybody does, but the Argos had some issues with Geno towards the tail end of that last game they played against each other. So I would think Peters gets that assignment, but he'll definitely get help.
He'll have his work cut out for him because with Geno being the Eastern nominee for most outstanding player, he's going to want to live up to that. And this is a big game. This is a big game for Geno. I mean, it's been a long time since Montreal's gotten to this point, won a championship. And, of course, Geno's a fantastic player, so he's the type of player you would think of as having multiple Grey Cup opportunities. But with Montreal, obviously, that hasn't come yet, so maybe that arrives on Sunday, that opportunity for him. It's the biggest game of his career, so he definitely wants to shine, no question about it. In your opinion, obviously with this being such a huge game, you'd think, okay, the hometown has to sell out. Like you're one step away from being in the championship game. But when it comes to Toronto and the fan base there, yes, they have their diehards. Yes, they have their longtime fans, and they'll be there for sure. But everybody else, like the casual fans and all that, we just don't know, and we won't know until kickoff, essentially. What do you think it's going to have to take for Toronto fans to realize just what they have in this team and come and support them?
It's a shame, really, because, I grew up I'm a lifelong CFL fan, and I remember a time when Toronto was extremely popular. I know that to modern-day fans, it seems crazy, but they were hottest ticket in town. They were like the New York Yankees in the CFL. Everybody hated them, but they were so, vastly popular. Obviously, the John Candy years, Doug Flutie, all those greats. And so, to see them at this point where they have an awesome fan base, but there's been a lot of fans that, lapsed fans that don't follow the CFL anymore in that city, or a lot of newer fans that had no interest in it. So it's unfortunate. So I don't know what the attendance is going to be like. I've tried to reach out and find out, how they're doing ticket sales wise, but they should have 20,000 fans there. I don't think they will. So, that's unfortunate. For a team second year in a row, and as far as answering your question, what do I think needs to happen? There's so many layers to that in terms of that market. A lot of it has to do with ownership, promoting more, and actually investing in communities and just getting out more. And, unfortunately, Toronto in their own city gets ignored in terms of promotions, and the Toronto Sun and others, they don't do the Argos justice, because it's the old, I'm sure some people will fight me on this. They're the oldest franchise in sports. So, the history is great with the Argonauts, but it's a shame, but I don't think it's an overnight thing. I think there's a lot of layers to it. And in terms of them building popularity over time, they're going to need to start connecting to newer fans. They have their older fans They need to find a way to start connecting to newer fans, and their ownership has to do a better job. You have to do what BC has done. You have to put in the effort. And MLSE, very successful outfit, they haven't been very successful with how they've operated and run the Toronto Argonauts. There's no nice way to put that. So it's just the way it goes. They failed. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. The team is very good. Michael Clemens, gem. They have a very talented organization. They have a lot of good football players. Last 2 years, they've been very good. I think winning a championship would help in order to kind of help change the perception, but they need to do more than just that in order to become a more respectable box office draw. It's not the player's fault, the coach's fault, or anybody who's part of that football club. It's really upper management.
We just got to get Drake out to an Argos game or two. I think that'll fix everything. It worked for the Raptors, right? So,
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. I mean, they're just, unfortunately with the younger generation, the CFL's not on the radar. The NFL, obviously, it goes without saying, the NFL's super popular everywhere. But in these big cities, it's good to see Montreal improving slightly. That's such a beautiful franchise, such a beautiful place, awesome history. It's great to see BC doing as well as they have and improving upon it. These big city teams need to do better in the CFL, and hopefully we get to the point where each one of them, it has 25,000 fans at every game. And your ratings do well for these teams. These teams do well in terms of home viewership, but you'd like to see more people come out to the games.
Considering this is a gate-driven league, yeah, you definitely need as many butts and seats as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about it, like the CFL hasn't advanced. I know they're doing stuff with Genius and all that. They haven't gotten to the point yet where they figured out that how they can be profitable and more popular by using a lot of different revenue streams and not just be driven by tickets. But you can tell whether or not you're a hot property if people show up to watch you. So yeah, that's been an issue for Toronto, Montreal, BC. It's getting better in Montreal. It's definitely gotten much better in BC. There's a lot of potential for that to be a hot franchise for a long time to come, the way that new ownership and leadership is running things. So the history of teams like the Alouettes and the Argonauts is beautiful. I mean, the players they've had, everything. So to me, it's top notch. But unfortunately, in a lot of these big city places, it's, for some people, the CFL is an afterthought. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way, but we've reached that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, switching to the game itself, I'm going to ask this question. You're going to fill in the blank. The Montreal Alouettes are going to advance to the Grey Cup because they
slow down and stop the Argonauts offense. Keep them limit the Argos from getting in the end zone and frustrate McLeod Bethel-Thompson. I know that's the elongated answer, but I think that's a big key there. Like the last time the two teams met, the Argonauts did a very good job of driving right down the field on Montreal, especially when the game was on the line. So they rallied down the field and scored, and then Montreal came back and tied it. And then it was a little too easy, even though everyone focused on the Rouge and Worthy out of bounds and all that. A little too easy for McLeod Bethel-Thompson and the Argos to drive down the field against Montreal's defense. So their defense, if they play the way they did against Hamilton, they'll be in the Grey Cup.
All right. And second part, the Toronto Argonauts are going to advance to the Grey Cup if they do
score in the red zone. That's the biggest problem the Argos have sometimes is they mount good drives, but they don't finish them. So they're gonna need to do that against Montreal's defense in order to win. A year ago, when they lost in the East Final, they squandered several opportunities in the red zone against Hamilton. And for whatever reason, Ryan Dinwiddie, Cloud Bethel-Thompson, they've had scoring issues in the red zone finishing drives. So in the most clutch moment possible, they're going to have to come through in that area, and if they want to go to Saskatchewan.
Yeah, without question, this is, as I've said, folks, this is a massive game for not just the Alouettes, but for the Argos as well. I mean, it's about bragging rights. It's about proving to the rest of the league that, hey, this is not the division you think it is. This is not the CFL East. Like these are two teams that could very well walk away with the Grey Cup trophy at the end of the year.
It's funny to me that you guys are longtime CFL fans as I am. It's just this is not too long ago. I know people want to change the playoff format, and you've heard people kind of be critical of the East. But it's not too long ago that I remember two Eastern teams winning the Grey Cup that were kind of like made fun of, for lack of a better term, in Ottawa and Toronto. They didn't have great stellar regular season records, but they ended up hoisting the whole thing. And, you know, in Montreal's case, when you look at them, they have big wins this year. So they, you know, obviously beating Winnipeg is a nice chip on your shoulder. But they got hot towards the end of the year, and they've shown that they can stand toe-to-toe with anybody. And so, you know, when the smoke settles, you know, for all the critical things that have been said about the East, it would not shock me if an East team is hoisting the trophy.
Wow. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So what's the one thing that you're going to be looking for?
Not so long ago with Ottawa, we saw them do it. We saw Toronto do it with Mark Trestman and the last Argos. A lot of people said, well, this shouldn't even be a playoff team. And then they beat Calgary and they beat Saskatchewan. And so we saw that with Ottawa, too, when they went on their run. It's really about, you know, who you are towards the end of the season and coming through in these games. Your record kind of goes out the window at this point of the season. It's all nice. It looks great on paper, but the best teams win at this time of the year in the biggest games.
And isn't it crazy to think that the last time both the Argos and the Alouettes won a Grey Cup, it was with the coach-GM duo of Mark Trestman and Jim Popp?
Isn't it? That's funny. I'm writing an article for CFLNewsHub.com, and that's one of the things I have in the article. You know, it's kind of reliving the last final between the Argos and the Alouettes 10 years ago. And then you're looking at Trestman. When you look at the Alouettes, you see, obviously, Calvillo's on the field. Now he's on the sidelines. So, but, you know, 10 years later. But, yeah, Trestman doesn't get kind of the respect. At least, you know, in Canada he does. But in the States, I don't know, sometimes people knock him, but they don't realize how successful he was up north. And he's been a good coach his whole life. So, yeah, Mark Trestman, the last time either franchise, the Owls or the Argos, won the whole thing, Trestman was at the, you know, behind you know, in the car, behind the steering wheel there, leading the way.
It's incredible. Okay, Mike, just to kind of wrap this up, I mean, there's no question. This is a massive game. This is for all the marbles, so to speak. I mean, not obviously for all the marbles, but I mean, as far as the Eastern Division goes, it's for all the marbles. What's the one thing you're going to look for more than anything else from both of these teams? What's the one thing that's going to you're really looking forward to seeing, and what do you expect to see this coming Sunday?
You know, I'm curious about two players in particular, William Stanback and Andrew Harris. Stanback is just getting his legs out, you know, from under him, and he's gotten better in every performance. In this type of game, what's at stake? You know, I'm wondering if we're going to see peak William Stanback for the first time really this year, because he got hurt in week 1. So in these types of games, the premier elite players step up. And so I know that it's hard to keep Walter Fletcher off the field, but I'm going to have my eyes on him, because he could theoretically take over the game if he's ready to be the player he always has been. And so on the flip side, I see the same type of situation with Andrew Harris, 35 years old, don't know what's left in his tank. But a year ago at this time, he helped Winnipeg get to the Grey Cup by rushing for over 140 yards. And then when Winnipeg needed him, when they staged a comeback against Hamilton to win the Grey Cup last year, Andrew Harris stepped up. So he's been one of the most clutch performers in the CFL during his career. So you wonder with the long layoff whether or not what's at stake. I mean, this could be a swan song for him. This could be the end of the road. This could be Andrew Harris's last chance. I'm sure part of him is probably motivated to go play Winnipeg for the Grey Cup. That's provided the Bombers get there again. But those two players, I think the elite players, the guys, it could be a signature moment for a player. Harris has already proven himself. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the all-time great runners in the history of the CFL. William Stanback has a chance to be in that conversation, but he's got to have those big-time performances like Harris has had in the past. So I'm watching the Geno Lewis and the William Stanback and the Andrew Harris, and then the two quarterbacks. You know, Harris, despite his great career numbers, he's one of the most efficient quarterbacks. People don't really like focus, but he's one of the most efficient, accurate quarterbacks in the history of the CFL. But until you hoist the trophy, you don't really get the respect. And by the same token, McLeod Bethel-Thompson is a journeyman player who's actually coming to his own late in his career, and he's a respectable CFL quarterback. But for whatever reason, he gets criticized, and he's like thrown out of when nobody will mention him in the elite conversation for various reasons, some justified. But I think this is a career-defining moment for the players that I'm mentioning here. And so only one side can win in these types of games. So, but you can change your narrative by getting to the Grey Cup. You got to win the Grey Cup. There's no question about it. But it's in these types of games where you find out who your best players are and who are the individuals that deserve to be looked upon in the pantheon of great players.
Guy's knowledgeable. I'll give him that, man. It's always fun to see what the other talking heads think about the upcoming games itself. But I mean, it's Mike. Again, we've had Mike on before this season, and he knows exactly what he's talking about. And he gave a pretty good preview on what his thoughts are on the upcoming game this Sunday. Without
question. And I mean, if you weren't excited about this game before, and even if you're not a fan of the Argonauts or the Alouettes, I think if you were to go based strictly on what Mike's been talking about and what to look forward to, like from both sides for both of these teams, I think if you were a casual fan just going to be tuning in for this game just to see who's going to go to the Grey Cup, I think you're going to be just a little bit more excited now, just based on the insight, the analysis that Mike was able to provide. And once again, we're so thankful to be able to have him on. And again, like if you're not hyped for this game already, I like to think that this show is going to help turn the hype meter up just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And speaking of the game itself, as of we are taping this now, the game is now down to a 3-point favorite. It was 3.5. Toronto is favored by 3 points, Cliff. So they got the hometown 3 points. So it's basically a pick 'em. And the over/under is currently at 48. The weather right now, it's changed. It looked like it's going to be about 5 degrees at kickoff from what I have seen. So weather shouldn't be a factor. Obviously, they're going to be playing on grass, not turf.
They do get the lake effect winds coming off of into the field.
But we're not talking Buffalo. You've seen lake effect snow for Buffalo. It's absolutely stupid.
It really is, but. And do I think we're going to get dumping of snow this coming Sunday? No, but
no.
Let's not forget, if this comes down to a kicking game, I mean, depending on what side of the field you're kicking towards, I mean that this is something that both Boris Bede and David Cote are really going to have to truly think about and be ready for. Like both teams, really, when you think about it. I mean, this game, we've shown that this game, a Rouge could decide this game as well, just like it decided the two other very important games for these franchises.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Obviously, we're only past the first day of practice, so we won't be seeing the depth charts until Friday, probably either late Friday or early Saturday, probably early Saturday, and we'll get those posted over on our socials. Thoughts, Cliff? I mean, it is, the Alouettes have not been, have not had the potential of being being in an East Final and potentially getting to a Grey Cup in such a long time. What are your thoughts as a fan going into this game?
It's massive. I mean, it's to be in this position again for the first time since 2014. It means a lot, and knowing that the Grey Cup is one win away, it's got to weigh heavily on this team. You can't not think about it. And for fans as well, I mean, like just the excitement, like you don't want to look at Toronto and say, oh, that's a gimme, that's an easy win, because it's not. I mean, Toronto has been consistently good all season long, despite injuries, despite, players coming out of nowhere and just being automatic superstars. Like this team is built to win as well. And there's so many similarities to Toronto and Montreal. Like I would say this is about as evenly matched a game as you're going to find this season. And knowing that this is basically for all the marbles, like the winner of this goes on to the Grey Cup is incredible. Like you're getting the best of the best as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Montreal has proven that they belong in this conversation. They deserve to be here in this moment at the Eastern Final. Toronto too. And they've had the benefit of a rest. They've had the chance to see what Montreal has to offer. They have a chance to see what's going on and who to get ready for. Montreal, all they've got to go by is, okay, well, we remember playing these guys a couple weeks ago, and more than likely you're going to be facing that same team again. Mm-hmm. Except now you've got the potential wrinkle of Andrew Harris being back in the lineup. I mean, we don't know what AJ Ouellette was able to do a couple weeks ago versus Montreal, and that guy was tough to bring down. Andrew Harris we know that he really turns it on for the playoffs. And he's also got to be motivated as heck, too, because he wants to get back to the Grey Cup and maybe even face his former team in the Blue Bombers if they advanced in the Western Final. I mean, that's a tremendous storyline right there.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, both of these teams are motivated by different factors, but I'd say they're equally motivated. Like, this is going to be a hell of a game as far as I'm concerned. Like, this is not going to be a snooze fest by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it shouldn't be. I mean, it's also the first time, by the way, since 2005 that the Alouettes have faced the Toronto Argonauts in an Eastern Final in Toronto. So it's been a while, dude. I mean, yes, last time that these two teams met in an Eastern Final was in 2012 here, but still, it's been a while that those are the heydays, if I remember correctly, of the Toronto Argonauts. So it's been a while, but either way, this should be fun.
Yeah, no, it's you think back to those previous games, and you look at the way these two teams are stacked up against each other. This truly is, like, obviously the Vegas odds makers are looking at this as a pick'em, and you can't help but wonder if everybody else is going to be thinking the same thing. Like, either one of these teams can easily be the Eastern representative and go on, and I'll even go so far as to say will be very competitive and could potentially win the Grey Cup, which is hard to think. Like, when we were talking about, like, this was the CFL least for the better part of the year, but these two teams were clearly saving it for November, and that's what you got to do in the Canadian Football League. You got to be ready to compete in November to show that you belong as one of the premier teams, and that's what these two teams are right now. Is they're competing, and the winner of this is going to be, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the best teams that this league has to offer. And my God, it's incredible to think about the fact that Montreal, despite all of their trials and tribulations this year, and it has been a crazy ass year for the Alouettes when you think about it, for them to get to this point is nothing short of remarkable. And my God, Toronto too has, I won't say they haven't had an easier time, because they've had their tales of woe as well. They've been through it as well. So, I mean, it's almost unfortunate that one of these teams is going to go home, and that's their season right there. Like, the best they can hope for is say, well, at least we made it to the Eastern Final. But I mean, man, it's just an incredible tale. Looking at these two teams, how they stack up against each other, and just to think about what's going to be coming this coming Sunday it's tremendous.
Exactly. I want to reach out to Cliff and myself to chat. You can do so on social media, or you can email us. You can email me at tim.capper@alouettesflightdeck.ca, or you can email Cliff over at clifford.pine@alouettesflightdeck.ca. Heads up, Alouettes Nation and friends of the pod. Your boys from the pod will be in the Big Smoke. We will be there at BMO. It'll be my first trip to BMO Field, but we will be there in the stands to cheer on the Alouettes in the Eastern Final. It'll be my very first game on the road to watch the Alouettes for the Eastern Final, so it should be fun.
Oh, without question. We've been pretty good luck charms for the Alouettes on the road this year. I mean, it was only one game, but they still won on the road when we were there. So, and the Alouettes finally got that win in BMO Field earlier this year, even though it was a glorified preseason game. They still got the W. So now they know they can win at BMO Field. It's just a matter of they got to show up, be ready to go, which I have every confidence in the world they will be. And yes, Tim and I will be there. We will be witnesses, hopefully, to be able to say that, yes, the Alouettes won and are going to represent the East at the Grey Cup later this month in Saskatchewan.
That's right. Again, just reach out to us on social media if you're going to be at the game. We'd love to see you. We don't know if we're going to be sitting yet, but again, we'll just follow us on both on social media and the Alouettes Flight Deck Twitter account also, and for all the information that we're going to be putting out there. So we will be back next week to recap the game and hopefully preview the upcoming Grey Cup matchup with the Alouettes versus to be determined. But either way, we appreciate every one of you for listening. And again, as I said, we will be back next week to continue the broadcast season for 2022. So for everybody here, the Alouettes Flight Deck, for Cliffy D, I'm Tim Capper. We're on Final Approach.